this summer, I am going to attempt to teach myself a new skill. Coming up next year, I'm going to be teaching knife safety to Cub Scouts, and I think it would be fun if I learned how to make their folding blades. Now I have this book here. Focusing on stock removal of knife steel would work, but it doesn't achieve the desired skill that I want to know. I could take this bar of 1095 high carbon steel, cut it to shape, grind it down, easy peasy, be done with it. But that's not the skill I want to learn. I want to learn how to do it with fire and a hammer. One of the biggest challenges with trying to make 5 identical folding knives is I need to be able to make 5 identical blades. If I was doing that by stock removal, and this particular steel would be perfect because it's already approximately the right width for the type of knife that I'm wanting to make, it'd be very easy to make them 5 identical ones. But forging with a hammer to get 5 identical ones will be a lot more challenging. So before I start working on the blades I need for that, I'm going to do a practice fixed blade that is going to be trying to match a parameter. Now this is the fixed blade that I am going to try to mimic first. Now what this is a buffalo skinning knife. And the reason I want to use this one as my template is a little fun story. Back when I was a kid hiking on a bluff, I found an old rusted knife. I thought it was kind of neat. I didn't know what it was. I picked it up. I brought it home. Now, my dad helped me clean off the rust, get it resharpened, and it got razor sharp. And it actually became his favorite knife to use in the kitchen because of how sharp it was and how fine the blade was. And he continued to use that for many years until a couple years ago when it finally broke on him. Knives eventually wear out. So I chose to do the buffalo skinning knife because I think it would also be fun if when I go visit my dad this summer, I can surprise him with a new knife. Now as you can see, this knife is going to be more narrow than this, but again, it's already about the same thickness. So one of the challenges I'm going to have is one, I need to be able, since I'm not doing this by stock removal, again, very easy to do with stock removal, but since I don't want to do it by stock removal, what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to need to cut off a section of this. I'm going to need to shrink this down, but because of the thin profile of it, while that will make it easier to heat up in a forge, it will be tighter, harder to compact this down to this knife shape because I'll have to push it this way and then push it this way. Now I'm not sure how far that will go, so we are going to start with more steel than I need. So I want to do my steel right here. So I'm going to take my steel, I'm going to cut it off right there. Now I'm not a professional YouTuber, as you can probably tell. I don't have a real setup to mount cameras, and so I won't be able to get every aspect of this process on film because a lot of times, such as cutting my steel, I'm going to need 2 hands. But as you can see, I have now cut off my bar stock to about the same length as my blade. Now my next goal is to form that into a billet that will be about the same width I'll ultimately get to, and maybe fuller out the blade once I get there. Now the problem is because this is thin material, it's going to have a tendency to want to fold rather than to compact. So I'm going to be having to fight that a bit we'll see how well I do. Alright, so here's the forge that has been gaining dust in my garage for about 2 years now, I think, 3 years. I don't know. It's not getting a lot of attention, not getting a lot of love. So let's hook this thing up and get our fire going. So now I have the forge going, and one thing I kind of want to point out here, if you've ever watched Forge and Fire, you always see that huge flame out coming out the front. Well, that's visible on the show because they use special filters for it. But even though you can't see it, there's still that wave of flames coming out. So you have to be very careful working with this. You have to remember the fire is still coming out of this forge. Alright, here we go. And it's one of the things I didn't have. I have tongs, as you can see when I was putting it in, but I didn't necessarily have a good hammer. So I picked this one up from Harbor Freight, and I watched another YouTube video on how to reprofile the head to make it a little bit more useful. I did a little bit of that. I'm not sure if I did as well as he did, but we will see, and I will check back with you after I've had some time on working with this metal. Because, again, I don't have a camera set up, so I can't record the process while I'm using both hands to move steel in and out, hammer it, so forth. Alright, on my first pass with the hammer, I thought I had good color, but I lost the color pretty quickly. Wasn't able to move it too much yet. So I'm thinking I need to get it even hotter than where it was. Plus, I had a little slip with the angled tongs you grab from the side. So for this next pass, I'm going to try to use my flat tongs to see if that will work a little bit better. One other thing I want to point out, safety glasses, ear protection, gotta keep everything safe. Alright, now this is what I was talking about, where if you can see it, because of how thin it is, when I'm trying to compress it down into a thinner billet, it's starting to get a little bit of a warp. So as I work it, I also got to work that out without hopefully undoing the compacting that I just did. So I'm about a half hour into this. I can feel it in my knuckles and my joints. It is moving fairly well, I think. Definitely doing the folding that I was concerned about, but I've been able to alternate back and forth, keep it flat, more or less work through that. It's getting a little bit thicker, but I don't know, maybe next time I might cut more to the general close width that I need and focus more on developing that tip and the curve if I do this again. Now I got my lead edge most of the way narrowed down the way I want it to be. I'm getting a little bit concerned about some of the places where it folded over. If I'm not careful, I can get a cold shunt there, which is basically when it folds over on itself and it is dirty enough that there is forge scale on there, it prevents it from forge welding to itself. That is actually something I considered doing, is trying to maybe take the entire bar, get the entire bar hot, fold it in half, scrub it, clean it, and try my first forge weld as well today. But we're avoiding that. Alright, so I'm an hour into this, and shoulder, arm, bicep, that is getting tiresome. It would take a while before I could do this 10 hours a day for 5 days straight, which is what the Forged and Fire home competition goes on, but I'm getting there. I am actually going to start trying to shape the tip a little bit, because I need to get it a little bit, because the Buffalo skinning knife has a more of a rounded, tapered tip, as opposed to like a Tonto that has that sharp, straight edge. You have the Sax that has that, sharp angle from the back to the tip. The Bowie has the drop point, usually a false edge. Got to work on all these things. But the Buffalo knife is more rounded, so that's going to be a little bit more of a challenge. That requires a very specific shape. So I'm going to get started on that next. I mentioned earlier about kind of reprofiling my hammer, and the purpose of that is to try and have a flat side and a little bit more of a rounded side. Now, I could probably have this a little bit rounder, I think, but, and maybe I'll work on that in the future. But the biggest problem I'm running into right now is remembering what side is my flat side and what side is my round side when I go and pick up, because they do have different uses. Now this is that swoop that I'm talking about, how it kind of curves up, comes to the point, has this big belly, curved back. The tang, which I am going to go for the full tang, has this kind of slightly beveled center, but not too much on the finger grips. And so this is what I'm trying to recreate. Now, I have read a lot, and I've watched other people do this. So, in theory, I know what I'm doing. But I can tell you, reading what it says and watching someone else do it versus doing it yourself, there's a huge difference. Now here's another thing I'm not liking. This anvil, the top of it, the horn, is more or less very flat, and the paint, as you can kind of see, starts to burn if I try and use it too much with the hot steel. And man, that stinks. See, I might have to get an angle grinder, see if I can't grind a better curve to this to make it more useful. Now right here, I'm going to use my tongs so I don't accidentally want to touch it. Right here you can kind of see this part where the edge folded over. That is a part I'm a little bit concerned about as I'm curving this, because if there's too much forge scale and when that folded over on me, that will create a cold shunt and a weak spot in the blade. Right, so to compensate for my poor anvil, I have this big 3-inch thick bar round stock of, I think it's W1 or W2. I clamped it onto the side of it so it doesn't go anywhere. I'm using that to try and help get my angle, my curve on the back of it, to curve that back and around. And I'm definitely still a lot bigger than what I'm going for, but shape is coming along. All right, so I'm coming up on about 2 hours, which is kind of my cutoff limit, because I gotta get all this cleaned up and put away so my wife can come in and park the van when she gets home. She doesn't want to see all my tools out and such. But I'm getting there. I am going to work a little bit along the edge to kind of smooth that out using the round side of my hammer. I have another hammer here with a more aggressive rounding point, to more of a peen hammer almost, that I might switch to. I'm not sure yet, but I'm going to try and smooth that out. Maybe I don't think I want to get too much more work on the tang of it right now today. Definitely a lot of work, and I didn't even have to draw out like a thick bar. I mean, could you imagine if I was given that thing to use to make this knife blade out? That would have been insane. Speaking of which, actually at some point, because I like the aggressive curve on this, the aggressive curve because it's perfectly round and machine round, I want to get a piece of square iron that fits into the hole, and I'll have a friend weld that in place so I can actually set this whole thing on top of the anvil for when I want to do this, so I don't have to use the clamps. I might try and get this heated pretty evenly and cooled off on the anvil so I can get a little bit of a thermal cycle with it. I know ultimately I will be thermal cycling a bit more with the some cat litter before I'm done, but this is definitely, I just want to take some of the stress off of it that I put in it today before I come back to work on it tomorrow. Now, just as an example, I have the gas off right now and it is still flaming red hot in there. That is hot. Now, a question I'm sure someone's going to ask, did I drop the seal at all while I was working it? In fact, yes I did. Once, I dropped it very early on, right here. That's why I switched from initially using the angle tongs to these flat tongs, but then after I had the tang area then narrowed down quite a bit, I was able to switch to the angle tongs to hold on to that a lot easier. Now, let's see, I still have this part here that I'm definitely very concerned about having a cold shunt right there. May have to just grind that out. I don't think it's going to be too deep. It should be fairly shallow, so it should grind out. Along the tang here, we have some rather thick spots along the edge and kind of narrow on the inside, and obviously you can see all my hammer marks here. And if I take this, and this is still quite hot, flip this over, you can also see here where I need to work on this. I really just need to come in, work this with the, and again you can see some fairly deep hammer marks right here. What that's coming from is here. I have my flat side, and then this edge, and then a second edge I profiled in. I'm going to have to do that more, so it doesn't have quite such a sharp edge, and that way that will stop leaving this. And I also have to come out here and work this to get that a lot smoother and a bit more even. But all in all, 2 hours, not too far off. If I was trying to compete in Forged in Fire, I suppose I could quench this and grind it out to shape the rest of the way, but I'm going to keep working on the anvil. Now this knife length that I'm copying, again you can see here, I would need to pull that in quite a bit more, and my edge is not nearly as refined as this one. I need to bring this side in a bit, bring it in here, get this a less straight and more of a swoop, and bring this curve a bit more over. I think the tang will clean up nicely as I go to work it. If I ever try to do if I'm looking at this again, I think with this thin of a starting stock, I should definitely start off with something I don't need to compress quite so much to get to that tang width, because again, I'm trying to do this with minimal stock removal to make sure that the grain structure and the strength overall stays up. Another thing that I was working on is, like, when you're working on this, you know, you work one side, flip it over, work the other side, go back and forth, whether you're here, whatever the case may be, because you want to try and keep that as even as possible, and so you can avoid things like this flaw here that I keep pointing out, because whilst this has that fold over, and we'll see how that looks when we get to grinding, this side here, I don't know how well you can see it, but I can feel it, because it has that fold over, you can feel that thicker part right there. So we'll see how that works.